Hi, Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal. My name is Neelam Mansingh Chowdhry. I live in Chandigarh and I'm delighted to be part of Natrang Jammu series of talks. The topic that they have decided for me is my vision of theatre. I think it's a very broad kind of topic, and I will try and gather it and make it more singular because vision is not a static phenomena. It keeps on changing as you grow according to the text, according to the context, according to the references, according to the space in which you are performing. Um, the last play that I did was called Gum Hai. I'll start from the last work I did and then perhaps enter into other performances that I have done. The last play that I did was called Gum Hai, which was based on a text by an Aboriginal writer from Australia called The Seven Stages of Grieving. I took bits and parts of the text. It was about protest, it was about loss, it was about disenfranchisement, it was about lost homelands. I took bits and pieces of it and then wove it in terms of a beginning and an end, using some core of the idea as the impulse to develop the rest of the structure of the performance. Let me also try and say that for the last 7, 8 years, most of the plays that I've done are not made on what we call the well-made script, with a beginning, middle, and end. It's based in a certain way. It was a choice that I made. A choice that you make is not always conscious. It's not always thought through. Maybe it is ways that you challenge yourself and say, अब ये काम बहुत हो चुका, कुछ नया नया सोचें. As a director, you don't want to repeat yourself. Again, not repeating yourself is not something that you say, I'm not going to repeat myself. There's something within you that makes this kind of decisions for you. तो 5-6 सालों से 7 सालों से जो भी मैं काम कर रही हूँ वो कहीं ना कहीं जो कहते हैं उसका नाम दिया जो गया है आजकल, it's called device productions, which means you take an improvisation, you develop that improvisation. The improvisation is also created on the basis of some kind of text that you use as reference. I'm just going to see because so much is happening. Okay, these are all welcome messages, right? I would also like to know in which language do you want me to speak? English, Hindi, or a mixture of both? I'll wait for some response because for me to look and to talk is a format that is quite unfamiliar, but I'll try and do it as well as I can. अभी क्या हो रहा है, जो भी मैं काम कर रही हूँ, it starts from an idea. And how you develop that idea. What are the things that you require and you dip into? You need an actor, you need an idea, you need an actor who will develop that idea. You need a space in which that idea will be developed. You need some objects which extend the narrative of the idea. You need some costume, and some text. I tell the actors that let's talk about protests. Let's talk about what does home mean to you? What does loss mean to you? And how they develop it is really based on their own individual assertions. कभी कभी तो जो काम वो जो improvisation के जरिए जो काम दिखाई देता है वो बहुत ही अलग होता है according to what I had set out to do. Sometimes it comes nearest to what I'd imagined. Sometimes it creates something so magical that it expands my own idea of what I need to do. In this way, all the work that I've been doing for the last couple of years is what I would call collaborative work, where the actors are as much participants in the development of the narrative as the director. This does not in any way mean that my role as a director has ceased to exist. It's just that the that the responsibility and the accountability gets distributed. But I will always remain, as a director, the central point, which chisels, which nurtures, which tells them what to keep and what not to keep. What is the process? I mean, vision is such a huge word. Vision means ethics, vision means a way of working, vision means a commitment, vision means a trust, vision means many more things, all these things and many more things as well. Um, Existing texts at this point of time do not really fit in terms of what I'm searching for. This is not a judgment. This is just a response. Like I always tell the actors that what are the things that you have to look into? We rehearse for 2 months, we rehearse for 3 months. Um, Rehearsal is a process by which we deal with creating exactitudes through a spontaneous rendering of an idea, of a body in relationship with space, of a body in relationship with words, a body in relationship with words and sounds and objects and musical notes and movement. So there's a combination of many things that go into making a moment. How do you pull out that moment? How do you say that this moment works? You know, the word director, as I always say, has a very has a resonance of control. The director means control. It means to be in authority. But for me, being a director really means about being with a group of people, responding, breathing together, creating together in a space. It is about intuition. It is about instincts. It is about meeting the unfamiliar. We might think, हम ये सोच भी सकते हैं कि ये कितना एक तरह का फ्री स्पेस है, कुछ भी करो, एक्टर कुछ भी करे, डायरेक्टर कुछ भी करे, उसको फिर कैसे बुनना है. But this is a much tougher space to be in, because you have no text which you can hold on to. Okay, this is the first scene, then it enters into a second scene, then this is the third, then this is the development of plot, development of the growth of a character, the ending, the climax. वो कुछ जो tools होती है ना security के, वो हमारे पास नहीं है. So everything is based on experience, everything is based on what seems right, what sounds right, what smells right, what looks right. So all your decisions are based on really not something that you have learnt in a classroom, not something that you've learnt through theoretical text, but something that you have gathered as you have been in this profession for some time. In the beginning, when I started working on what you call the well-made play. I did Naga Mandala by Girish Karnad, Yerma by Federico Garcia Lorca, Mad Woman of Chaillot by Jean Giraudoux, The Suit by Can Thamba. Then we slowly started, because I work with a poet, a very famous poet called Sangeet Natak, who is like the voice of Punjab. So we have a lot of dialogues. We talk, we discuss. I talk about the way I'm going to work, what are the images that come into my mind, how I see the play, because every text that you pick up, even if it's a well-made play, is interpretive. No two directors will take the same text and do it in the same way. Everything depends upon your vision, to use the word on which the topic of discussion is based on today. It depends upon your vision, how you wish to do it, what are the colors you're going to use on the stage, what kind of, how are you going to organize the space, what is the frisson between each character, what is the group composition. So I think everything that you do is not a template that you follow. It's really got to do with how you see the universe, how you position yourself socially, politically, emotionally, intuitively, in terms of the images that you create. Because most of the work I've done, even when I was working with a well-made play or now with devised productions, for me, there are two texts going on simultaneously. Not two, I would say four texts, if I may be allowed to say that. One is the written text, then there is the subtext, then there is a text which has not been written, but it exists in some kind of resonance that you find in the subtext and the written text. And then there is what you would call the visual language of the text. To me, the visual narrative and the textual narrative are both of equal weightage. Sometimes I remove pages and pages of the written word and try and make the text come alive through um, through the body, through objects, through stage action. Now I will come to my whole feeling about stage action. I feel that what you do on the stage, if you have the actions that you do on the stage, if there's truth in the action, somehow there's a possibility of there being truth in the emotions. Like for example, if I always tell my actors, अगर आपको चिट्ठी लिखनी है स्टेज पे, आपको कहना है माय डियर सो एंड सो, मैं बहुत परेशान हूँ, आप कब घर आ रहे हो, आपको स्क्रिबल नहीं करना, आपको ये नहीं सोचना कि दर्शक तो देख नहीं सकते, को एक्टर भी नहीं देख सकता. मैं I can make it seem like I'm writing, but I'm not writing anything. I tell them you must write what you are supposed to write, because the whole way you will write, the way you will look, your concentration will get a kind of element of truth, which is what we are all looking for when we come on the stage. Because truth of the moment, truth of the action is all a result of the right feelings. If our feelings are right, then our action is right, then the action will lead to the emotions being well balanced. I wish I could be asked some questions. I feel a bit isolated just speaking and not knowing who I'm talking to. This is a new format for me. When I did Naga Mandala, which was before the play had actually been published, I was, prior to that, I was working in Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal with B.V. Karanth, and I was very fortunate that 3 years at the NSD, I had such an incredible teacher in Alkazi Sahab, who taught me about entry and exit, who taught me about detailing, about costumes, about that nothing on the stage should look clumsy, everything should be organized, there should be exactitude in entry, exactitude in exit, exactitude in speech, exactitude, even if you have to stir sugar in your cup of tea, for how long should you stir it, and even that should be timed according to your speech. So one had a very rigorous kind of training, and that training was really based very much to some extent on Western methodologies, on Stanislavski, on Meyerhold, on Terov, which had a lot to do with high realism, hyperrealism, but in a certain way, Alkazi nativized it, made it more comfortable to the Indian body and to the Indian responses to action and to and text and what you're doing. And then I was very lucky that my husband got a posting to Bhopal after we got married, and I was there for 4.5 years working with B.V. Karanth, which was another very vital period for me, because B.V. Karanth was a people's person. He was from the Gubbi Theatre Company. I used to always joke that Karanth can also do a Chekhov in a musical form by using techniques from the Yakshagana or from some other folk traditional impulses. So in a certain way, my education or my exposure to these two great masters formulated my approach to theatre. But in theatre, we all have to find our own voice. I remember Karanth ji saying to me when I moved to Chandigarh, जो भी तुम काम करोगे चंडीगढ़ में हमें भूल के करना है, हमें बिल्कुल अरेज करके तुमको काम करना है. But as you know, that one is always comfortable with the familiar. And in Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal, I worked a lot with which was Karanth's idea that we have to find a way of training for the local actor. We cannot keep on using method acting and systems of realism. We need to find our own indigenous way of training. But it has to deal with modernity. Because a theatre person who is doing, whether a Dharamveer Bharati's Andha Yog, or you're doing Ashar Ka Ek Din, or you're doing a Chekhov, or you're doing Nipson, you must find tools that are local, that are vernacular, and that are regional. And you have to train yourself to smell how to use and transform those tools in creating what you would call a modern actor. So it was an experiment where he took people from the folk narrative tradition of Madhya Pradesh, Rai Baredi, Nacha, all the master performers were called, and they were made to interact with the actors of Rang Mandal, which was a repertory set up in Bharat Bhavan in Bhopal, a Hindi repertory, where he wanted folk artists to be with urban actors and see what happens. There was no grand plan. There was no great thought. There was no great. There was no determined response to this encounter between tradition and modernity, but to see what kind of combustion happens. The same actors that we found who had come from Bina, Guna, Chhindwara, places around places in Madhya Pradesh, Jabalpur, Indore, these actors who were quite stiff and not very comfortable with their bodies, the moment they heard sounds which were familiar, something unlocked within them, some kind of memory, some kind of sense of where they were coming from. So you suddenly felt the same actors who were so uncomfortable when they were made to do some basic dialogue reading or some basic exercises became alive. And I think that that made you recognize that put people in a space where they can trust, where they can feel free, where they hear the rhythms and sounds of the familiar world that they inhabit, and see what happens. Anyway, to come back to Chandigarh, so when I came to Chandigarh, I was very interested in trying a similar experiment. And I think a lot had to do with the fact that I'd lived outside my state for so long. And, there was this whole thing about Punjabi language, being not a very sophisticated language like Bengali or Marathi or Malayali or whatever. And I thought to myself, the entire Guru Granth Sahib has been written in Punjabi. The entire Sufiana Kalam is in Punjabi. Why is it that this language seems to have such a distorted view in the minds of people who are outside Punjab? The other thing that really bothered me was that everybody felt that Punjab में कल्चर तो है नहीं, एग्रीकल्चर है. ये एक पुराना घिसा पिटा क्लीशे आपको सुनने को मिलता है. Then I thought to myself, this is crazy. You can't have culture without agriculture. Culture and agriculture are so inextricably linked together. All your images that come from your poetry has to do with procreation, has to do with growth, has to do with planting of the seed, songs of harvesting. Even in your Greek mythology or in your Indian mythology, whether you go to the Sanchi Stupa and you see the Shal Bhanjika, or you see Neptune coming out of the sea, it's got so much to do with the earth. It's got so much to do with the smell of the earth and about plantation and about even your imagery in your Sanskrit poetry has references to nature. So I found it a very enriching combination, but for it to be belittled seemed a bit odd to me. So I was determined कि जो भी मैं काम करूँगी वो पंजाबी में होगा. I will work in the Punjabi language, I will work with local actors, and I will work with what I call regional impulses. Thus began my journey in Punjab. So there was a vision there. There was an attitudinal thrust. There was a sense of a sense of value system that I had etched for myself. So in that whole experiment, I did Rashomon, which was done in Bhopal by Karanth as Matiya Burj, beautifully translated. I did that as Matiya Burj in Punjab. As I said, I was restoring to the familiar because I was branching out for the first time as an independent director. So you want to hold on to something that is familiar, but through that familiar, lead yourself into some kind of strange, unfamiliar spaces. So I used the Gatka, which is a martial art of the Nihangs, because Rashomon, if you're familiar with the film of Kurosawa, has so much to do with the martial arts, the whole value system that goes into the art of the samurai. So it was an interesting experiment. It was exploring the play in terms of my own. At that point, it seemed like form had overtaken, form fascinated me. Content, of course, was very rich, but I was also fascinated by my discovery of the form. Then I did Hi Ranja, which was done with the Taddis of Punjab, who are Sufiana singers. They sing the kissas of Hi Ranja, Sassi Punni, Sohini Mewal. So I did Hi Ranja, and I took the text of Varis Shah, who's written Hi Ranja, and so I was kind of swimming around trying to locate something that I could hold on to. Then I came across the Nakals. The Nakals are Nakal is from the Persian word which means to imitate. They are funsters, they hold a mirror to the time, they are social commentators, they dance, they sing, they are female impersonators. And I remember when I saw them, I was so fascinated. I went to the place where they were performing to see thousands of people sitting under a tent on a starlit night and seeing that something precious and meaningful was being exchanged between the audience and the actors on the stage was something quite overwhelming. Because I was so used to a proscenium theatre where you didn't even know who the person next to you was, sitting with strangers, maybe responding to the same experience, but not invading each other's space, still defined by our seat, separated, segregated. And the stories that they sang and enacted were local myths, commingling with national myths, renewed for local meanings. The gods that they evoked rode bicycles, aspired for a Maruti 500, and also sweated profusely. So it was like something which I had not experienced before. They could sing, they could dance, and what really fascinated me was the whole concept of the female impersonator. Because working with female impersonator for 32 years made me really try to uh, rethink what does gender mean on the stage. Is gender biological or is it a social construct? But for me, it went even somewhere else. It became a performative construct. How do you construct gender on stage? And it's really strange, without my knowing how they've changed my whole look at how I see actors. When I see actors, if I want to cast somebody in the role of the so-called written female protagonist, I have no problems identifying a male actor to do the role. So, in a certain way, certain boundaries of gender, of class, of caste have dissolved. Today, my group, today meaning since the last 32 years, has been a group of urban actors and traditional actors, both coming from different worlds, economic, social, educational, and making a work of art together, some way erasing the skin of separateness and finding points where they meet, separate, overlap, come together, and go their own separate way. So, this for me has been an interesting and meaningful um, experiment in how to create a work of art. And somewhere without my realizing it, this became my system of working. And also, I would like to interrupt my talk to put a little interjection here that even though I left Bhopal in 1984, till Karanth died, which was in 2001, his association with my theatre company continued. All the music that he designed for all my plays were designed by him. And what was interesting is that uh, without my realizing it, all my plays started having the element of music as a very significant component in the way I put my work together or the way um, I saw text. I also started seeing it musically. You know, when I started doing work, I the first really major play I did was Naga Mandala, and it was really very gracious of Girish Karnad to give an unpublished script to somebody who had not really had a body of work behind her. When I got the script, I found it really interesting. It dealt with this whole transformation of um, a snake into a man, was the whole conflict between illusion and reality, of moments of love, moments of happiness. Do they really happen or do we imagine them? What is imagination? What is real? My talking to you, is it real or am I imagining that I'm talking to you? Some really metaphysical questions. ऊपर से, it was so bizarre, the play. I mean, bizarre, I mean it in a challenging way, where you have a chorus of flames. कि क्या होता है जब आप रात को अपनी बत्ती बंद करते हैं, जब लाइट अपनी बंद करती है, वो लाइट को क्या होता है? जब दिया बुझाते हैं तो उसकी, where does the law go? Where does the light go? So a chorus of flames. How do you how do you how do you conceptualize it theatrically? How do you dramatize something so abstract? Was a challenge before me. Secondly, these, एक तरफ तो कॉन्सेप्ट बहुत मेटाफिजिकल है, ऊपर से जो उनकी बातचीत है आपस में, इट्स लाइक सम गॉसिपी किटी पार्टी, women sitting there saying, you know, मेरे घर में ये होता है, मेरे घर में वो होता है, वो बूढ़ा है, उसने जवान लड़की के साथ शादी की. So it was a mixture of the sublime and the mundane. How do you make that combination without using that mystical hue? On the other hand, you have a character which is called the story. That means each of us within us have a story, and which is waiting to come out, and how the story actually comes out of your body and becomes a beautiful girl. So there were some really unusual devices that were part of the script. And for me to concretize them, to make them relatable, to make them connect with myself and with my actors, and then hopefully with the audience, were the challenges before me. And it was, and you know, Nagamandala is one play which I've done 3 times. I think I did it 3 times, not out of personal choice. The first one was personal choice. Then in 2004, Girish Karnad asked me to revive the play and bring it for a festival in Bangalore. As you know, a play is now. जो आज हम करते हैं वो कल मर जाता है, उसका कोई महत्व नहीं रहता. A play is born in the evening and it dies at night. I don't think you can have a retrospective of theatre, because the language of performance changes so fast that what was relevant yesterday suddenly ceases to have meaning for you today. So I had to do it from the beginning, but I wanted to know if the script still spoke to me. And yes, it did. I found that there were so many elements which in 89 that I had not really focused on, which started having immense meaning for me in 2004. And then again, once again in 2014 or 2013, he asked me to do it again. So I had to refresh myself. Now, the only thing that was there was the music. The music that we used was B.V. Karanthji's music. And some of the actors were the same and some of the musicians were the same. But a lot of the actors had either drifted away or new actors came into the company, younger actors. So, but I had, my biggest fear was that I mustn't repeat myself. It must look like a fresh production. It must look like something from which I position myself in a completely fresh way. Only then is it meaningful for me to do a play over and over again. Then, the other play which I really enjoyed doing was The Suit. The Suit is a play by Karanth. It's a play which is written in Cape Town. It's a South African play. It's a 2-page play. It's not even a play actually. It's a short story. दो सफ़ों की कहानी है जिसमें है कि it's about apartheid. It's about the discrimination that the blacks have in their own country, where the white man is in charge and the black man is marginalized in his own homeland. And the whole thing is shown in a very interesting manner. Husband and wife, they have a lovely marriage. The husband makes tea for his wife every morning before going to work and plucks a rose for her and hands her a rose when she wakes up, and it looks like a sweet little family picture. एक दफे जब वो बस में जा रहा होता है तो उसका दोस्त कहता है कि मैं ये बताना चाहता हूँ, जब तुम काम के लिए जाते हो, your wife gets in a lover. He gets off the bus, he makes a turn, and he sees his wife in bed with another man. And he's completely devastated. But the man leaves his suit behind. कोई चीखना चलाना नहीं, कोई उसको ये नहीं कहता तुमने ये किया, तुमने ऐसा क्यों किया, कोई रोना धोना नहीं. He says now the suit is the presence in our life. वो सूट जो हैंगर पे है उनके साथ सैर करने जाता है, उनके बिस्तर में सोता है, खाना जब खाते हैं तो सूट और हैंगर साथ में बैठता है. In a certain way, it was a metaphor for the presence of apartheid in the life in your everyday life, how it can't be erased, and how this element of fear, this element of something monstrous in your life, continuously reminding you कि कुछ betrayal हुआ है, कुछ betrayal हुआ है. That was a very interesting play to me. I think वहाँ से शुरुआत हुई मेरा devised काम करने की, चुनौती देने की, क्योंकि 2 पेज के प्ले को 1.25 घंटे का प्ले बनाया या 1.5 घंटे का, मुझे याद नहीं, उसको कैसे डेवलप किया, सीन्स को कैसे कंस्ट्रक्ट किया, वो कहीं ना कहीं एक काम करने का तरीका बन गया. And after that, I did a play like Sibbo in Supermarket, Kitchen Katha, which is about women and food. I think sometimes I used to, I don't know if I still have them, some crazy ideas. I wanted to show, I said, play, stage पे हम सब कुछ दिखाते हैं. There's touch, there's emotions, there's sweat, there's sound. मतलब सब आपकी faculties का प्रयोग किया जाता है. But smell, the olfactory nerve has not been explored so much. So I wanted to do a play about cooking and sharing and eating and community kitchen. So सुजीत पातर जी जिनके साथ मैं काम करती हूँ, मैंने उनको एक वो कहने लगे कि आप कुछ तो कहानी दो, कुछ तो नैरेटिव दो. How will I develop it? मुझे कुछ तो, I need something to peg my ideas on. So I read a Latin American play called Like Water for Chocolate, an Aphrodite by Isabel Allende, and उसको हमने डेवलप किया. वो बहुत ही उनके कल्चर के साथ जुड़ा होता है. But for me, I'm also interested how text travels. How does it get transformed? आप कैसे अपना बनाते हैं? अपना बना के कैसे ऐसे लगता है कि जैसे वो अपना ही है, आपके मोहल्ले में हो रहा है, आपके बगल में ये कहानी सिचुएट हुई है. So Kitchen Katha was about food and cooking, and the scene time had to also be synchronized with the cooking time. क्योंकि हमने जैसे गेहूं को पहले छानना, फिर उसको चक्की में पीसना, फिर उसके पाउडर को आटे में गूंदना, फिर चपाती बेलना, फिर उसको बनाना और फिर खिलाना. इसका मतलब उसका टाइम और आपके डायलॉग के टाइम का पूरा एक संबंध होना पड़ेगा. एंड हाउ डू एक्टर्स सिंग एंड ईट एट द सेम टाइम, कि वो जलेबियां भी बना रहे हैं, पकौड़े भी बना रहे हैं, आटा भी गूंद रहे हैं, आलू की सब्जी भी बन रही है, और गा भी रहे हैं, और म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स भी प्ले कर रहे हैं. आई थिंक कारण जी ने बहुत जबरदस्त म्यूजिक तैयार किया, वे ही यूज द साउंड्स ऑफ द किचन, चक्की का साउंड, वो चटनी पीसने का साउंड, वो क्या उसे कहते हैं, स्टोन एंड पेस्टल का साउंड उन्होंने डॉवटेल किया with other musical instruments. So we had over more than 100 shows of Kitchen Katha. It was really, I think Nagamandala, Yerma, and Kitchen Katha and The Suit perhaps were the most traveled plays of my repertoire. So everything begins with an idea. You have to take risks. अगर आप रिस्क नहीं लोगे, कुछ नहीं होने वाला. रिस्क लोगे तो कुछ भी हो सकता है. Like for example, I'll come back to where I started when I did गुम है, which is the last play I did. अभी उसके 3 shows हुए, फिर कोविड हो गया, फिर आगे हम shows नहीं कर पाए. उसमें एक क्षण है जब कुछ होता है, कुछ बात कर रही है कि घरेलू बात हो रही है कुछ. उसके बाद एकदम because I had to go to another scene, the next scene, I have to create bridges. What kind of bridges? What are the bridges that take you from one story to another story? And then it suddenly, I don't know why, wo kahani, a little Kathak dance came into my mind. It had no sense, no logic, but it just seemed like right. It seemed like a right moment to have that dance. And I want to tell you that it's very important for me to trust कि जब कोई आइडिया मेरे जहन में आता है, उसको मैं एक्चुअलाइज कर लेती हूँ. एक ज़माना था जब कुछ आता था तो आई फेल्ट कि ये सही नहीं लग रहा, ये एक लॉजिक रैशनैलिटी में फिट नहीं होता. आई यूज्ड टू रिजेक्ट इट. बट नाउ आई फाइंड दैट हमारे अंदर एक आर्काइव है. वी हैव एन आर्काइव विद इन आवरसेल्व्स, एंड it enters into our workspace in a very subconscious manner. And here I'd like to give a little story. जब मैंने किचन कथा किया तो मैंने एक जैसे जो भी सेट था, सेट तो बेसिकली था कि स्टोव थे, 10 स्टोव थे, गैस सिलेंडर्स थे 10, और करछियाँ और डेगची और बेलना और सब्जी का एक काट. पर मैंने एक छोटा सा गेट बनाया, which was bamboo ka. It was wrapped up in gold tissue. And मैंने एक छोटा सा जैसे बच्चों का झूला होता है वो टांगा. उसके ऊपर मैंने एक pumpkin रखा. So I remember my actors asking me, मैम ये pumpkin किस वजह से? तो मैंने कहा मुझे मालूम नहीं, खाली मुझे सही लगता है. And they all laughed and they said ठीक है, सही लगता है. Of course it was used, that whole लकड़ी का this thing, ऊपर pumpkin और rope जो hanging है, and we used it in many ways. That became a frame, that became many things. And then I had a show in Chennai थे. I'd never been to Pondicherry. So चेन्नई के शो के बाद मैंने कहा चलो 2 दिन के लिए पौंडीचेरी 1 घंटा आगे है, 1.5 घंटा आगे. I want to go to Pondicherry. So I went to Pondicherry and I found that outside, I've never been to Pondicherry before. I found कि हर एक दुकान के बाहर एक one pumpkin is hanging. I was so surprised. I asked the shopkeeper, क्या pumpkin क्यों है आपके दुकान के बाहर? उन्होंने कहा कि ये अच्छा शगुन माना जाता है. It's supposed to bring in prosperity and it's supposed to bring in good luck. So then I recognize that within us, we have an archive of memories. That memories do not always start from the time we are born. They are coded and embedded within us for, if you believe in the whole theory of karma, in many births, they are embedded within us. And if we allow them to come into our workspace, then something, just trust them, go for it. Um, so ever since that incident, when I get a flash कि कुछ ये करना चाहिए, बहुत ही illogical, उसका कोई तुक नहीं होता, वो किसी आगे पीछे जो हुआ है उसके साथ संबंध नहीं रखता, but it just seems like I want to do it, I go ahead and do it. So I take risks. uh, when I talk about improvisation, I saw a message from Rohini Hatangadi asking me about, total improvisation. I don't really understand what total improvisation means, but I'll try and answer it. When I talk about improvisation, it really means that you float an idea. Now, the idea may have different meanings for different people in the group. When, like for example, I'll come back to the earlier play I had done, which is called Dark Borders. In Dark Borders, which is, before I come to that, I want to just share a little back information that for the last 5 years, I've been doing a lot of work based on the stories of Manto, Siddharth Hassan Manto. In fact, before COVID, I was in Delhi. I was working in Delhi, where I was working with the third year students on doing a production for them. They're finally a production, where I had taken Antigone by Jean Honoré and Sophocles and Toba Tek Singh, how they meet in the graveyard. So very often, I had done another play prior to this, License by Manto meets Bertolt Brecht's The Job. So sometimes I combine texts. I pull out things from different texts and I try to knit and weave them together, because I see a resonance in this text with that text, and how I can layer the text by putting in more ideas that can enhance. Because I don't like to take a text and just say शुरुआत यहाँ से फिर इसकी development फिर वहाँ तक पहुँचते हो. I like to kind of toss it around so that somewhere it becomes not linear but circular. It comes in loops, it comes in swirls, and something else happens. Now, when I was doing Dark Borders, it was all about devastation and death. And one of the actors did a wonderful exercise, Davinder. What he did was of course, when an exercise is wonderful, then I kind of refine it, where he shows that he takes a body, he drags it, he rolls the body around, he labels the body, he starts to take his clothes off. You almost seem that it's going to be a necrophilia, but basically it is, he sees that within the body that is dead, there is some roti that is wrapped up in a piece of paper. So he wants to get to that roti. So somewhere it reminds you of a story of Monto's, the story of, I can't remember the name now, where I can't remember the name, but so sometimes the actor throws up an idea, and then what do you do with that idea? How do you develop that idea? How do you chisel it, hammer it, give it shape, form, formation, context, reference? Hundreds of things go into it. Sometimes, as I said, what the actors create is very near to what I do. Sometimes I give them a catalyst. I tell them, ऐसे हो सकता है, वैसे हो सकता है. Like for example, when we did Gum Hai, we started off with a protest. What does protest mean to you? One actor took off his clothes, and suddenly the reference went to the protest in Assam when women were raped. how they all, I beg your pardon, not in Assam but in Manipur, how these Manipuri women went to the police station all naked, saying, "Now you rape us, we are naked, you don't have to strip our clothes," which became a powerful, powerful, powerful image that took the whole country by storm, made you recognize and made you so ashamed and embarrassed by what authorities have done to the brutalization of women. So I thought, wow, it's startling, but I can't have nakedness on the stage. So then the idea was suggested by the actor, but it developed and chiseled and refined and became something else. In fact, almost 2.5 months, I spent about 3 months in creating a show. Sometimes 2.5 months just go in working on ideas, creating, figuring out if it works or it doesn't work. And like a jigsaw puzzle, you have a series of um, scenes. How do you then make it into a cohesive whole? How do you do it? Do you link it up with the image? Do you link it up with the body? Do you link it up with music? Do you link it up with some overarching leitmotif? Are all the challenges that a director is confronted with, and makes the whole process sometimes much more complicated. But that, I think, is the beauty and joy of what it means to be in this creative space. Um, so I think, yes, improvisations have become an important tool, and it also becomes a tool which makes the whole rehearsal space very democratic. It makes it more egalitarian, where every actor and every object also becomes the author of the work that is in being processed. We all become part of the same journey. We all and it's all about pushing yourself. It's all about taking risks. It's all about saying, I'm going to jump to the deep end and figure out if it works or it doesn't. And so, I think um, there is no such thing as one way of working. The language of your work changes from production to production, not in any kind of dramatic sense, but it's part of your growth as an artist. Just like you want your plays not to be the same, you have to reject what you've done earlier for you to move forward. I think the worst thing is to fall in love with your work. I don't like an actor to be so much in love with their performance that somehow they can't escape that narcissistic sense of, um, you know, what a great emotion I had. Very often, if एक play होता है, तो I never see my work, because the moment I have spent 2.5, 3 months rehearsing and I feel it's ready for a show, then I erase myself. तब मेरा रोल खत्म. अब ये एक्टर्स की स्पेस है. आई डोंट वांट टू बी वन ऑफ दोस गमी डायरेक्टर्स, जो बैठ के फिर शो के बाद के ये अच्छा नहीं हुआ, ये आपने कैसा ठीक नहीं किया. So I sit in the wings and I let the actors do what they have to. So very often after the show is over, some actors will come and say, आज अच्छा नहीं हुआ शो. क्यों अच्छा नहीं हुआ? क्योंकि कल क्या हुआ कि मैं बहुत इमोशनल था जब मैंने वो सीन किया. आज इतना इमोशंस नहीं हुआ. I said, but that's a very poor gauge to think that आज रोए कल नहीं रोए. उसके ऊपर आपका हिंज होता है कि अच्छा किया नहीं अच्छा किया. I said, हम 2.5-3 महीने काम क्यों करते हैं? So that everything is set. It's like Stanislavski says, you have to work very hard to appear spontaneous on the stage. So what do we work? We work on all the external elements. The choreography, the objects, the chair on which you sit, catching the light, the dialogue delivery, where the pause has taken place. हमने इतनी मेहनत की एक एक्सटर्नल स्ट्रक्चर बनाने के लिए, क्योंकि जज्बात can't be summoned at will. You can't say अब मुझे ये, अब मैं कोई पोटली नहीं है कि आप उसको निकालो अपने जज्बात को, एक्सटर्नल एनवायरनमेंट को इतना सेट करो that emotions will automatically, the land is ripe for the flower to bloom. You have prepared the land, you've given it the right amount of chaya and heat and fertilizer कि वो अपने आप फूटेगा. So don't use that as a gauge. And I think whatever voice I have today, or whatever articulation I have about my work, it only happened because I was a student of two great masters. Alkazi Saab was the teacher that one can only dream about. And let me tell you, my 3 years at the NST, I never did I didn't do much work. I was in a space where I was so unsure. I didn't have any great role that I could say I've done. I didn't do anything. I was invisible for 3 years. But what I learned was all by observation. I observed him. When I saw him direct other actors, I heard, I listened. Whatever he said to actors became my value systems. When he talked about the devil is in the detailing, I understood what he meant. The costume, the way the chunni fell, your hair, the way you walked, the way you took your entry. I mean, he was incredible. Sitting in his class, if he was doing Fedra by Jean Racine, he became every character. Then on the other hand, B.V. Karanth, who saw theatre as a celebration, he saw it as improvisation, he saw it musically. Karanthi was not my teacher in the traditional sense. We were supposed to be colleagues, I a junior colleague to his seniority, but I really felt that he was a master, and I was at the right time, at the right place, in Bhopal when Bharat Bhavan was coming up as an institution. So, it's like Jean Genet says, they were never mature because they were never free. I mean, in a certain way, Bharat Bhavan trusted me so completely that I felt I had to grow to honor the trust that they gave me. So I think that's been my journey. And yes, when I came to Punjab, I had this wonderful collaboration with my folk musicians, the Nakals, and urban actors. We have been together since '84, so you can calculate it's almost 35 years. A lot of them have died, which is a great matter of pain to me, because they have left incredible memories. And because they worked with Karanji, they learned how to use musical instruments, traditional musical instruments, in a non-traditional manner. Because Karanji said anything that makes sound can be used as a music. Pipes lying in the garden, wo jo AC ki hoti hain, that curly whirly pipe, a plywood could be made into music. Dholak ka khali वो जो ऊपर का हिस्सा है, लेदर बिट, वो साउंड नहीं, साउंड तो साइड्स पे भी आ सकता है. साउंड नाद है, अनहद है, गूंज है. So he taught them, he also taught them how to free themselves from the traditional framework, because he said theatre music is neither traditional, it's neither classical. It has a lot to do with belonging to the genre of theatre. कि जो भी थिएटर पे होता है, it is in terms of the production that you are creating, the language you're evolving for the play. So I think slowly the foundation became so strong because of these two masters, that I started my own journey, trying to find my own way of working, my own leitmotiv, my own images, my own system of how to structure a play. So it went through many trials and errors. There's no such thing as a template that you follow, because templates also keep on changing. As you grow, the way you wish to express yourself also changes. Stories of the world are the same. I'm a storyteller. I want to tell a story in a way which is interesting and captures the interest of the audience. मैं बहुत सोचती हूँ कि क्या होता है स्टेज पे जो है एक्टर्स आते हैं, दर्शक बैठे हैं, दर्शक अलग अलग दुनिया से आते हैं, अलग अलग वजह से आते हैं, नाटक से क्या वो पाना चाहते हैं। कोई स्टैंडर्डाइज दर्शक नहीं होता। वो क्या सूत्र है, इनविजिबल सूत्र, जो एक कलाकार स्टेज से रिलीज करता है और भिन्न भिन्न लोगों को एक ही धागे में बांध के अपनी तरफ खींचता है। What is that magical thread? So that magical thread is something one is continuously exploring and trying to work towards. Yes, I think presentation, I'm going to take some questions. Um, Presentation and professionalism. Well, I don't know. I think presentation is very significant. It is a visual art. Because it's a visual art, how you place yourself in the space in which you inhabit becomes a presentation. You can't have, there has to be a color palette that you bring on the stage. You can't have colors that are not harmonious with each other. Then you must have, if you have a tablecloth, I mean, Alkazi taught us that if you put a tablecloth, you must see that the tablecloth sits well on the table. ये नहीं कि यहाँ से लटका है, वहाँ से लटका है, फूल मरे हुए हैं. You know, आप खिड़की के बाहर देखो, आपको क्या दिखता है? आपको खिड़की के बाहर देखो तो आपको बैक स्टेज का कचरा दिखता है, पर आपको कहना है कितना सुहाना मौसम है, कैसे पेड़ में फूल कैसे खिले हैं. So it is a world of illusion and imagination that you create. So the space that you create on the stage has to be really well planned and well thought through. It can't be random. It can't be, अच्छा ये भी लटका दो, वो भी लटका दो. I remember many years ago I saw a production of Aadhi Adhure. As you know, Aadhi Adhure is set in a bedroom. There's a bed and there are cupboards and there's a dining table and there's some chauke ka saman and there's a dressing table. I remember sitting in the audience and finding that none of the actors even once went to the dressing table. They did not once open the cupboard. Why have such a huge cupboard if you're not even going to open it once? Why have a dressing table if you're never going to use it? So whatever you put on the stage needs to be used. It can't be there for purpose of decoration or for creating the illusion of a room. So I think presentation is something you have to think and think it through. Professionalism. I think professionalism, I don't really, I think, I don't know whether you mean professionalism to do with money or professionalism in terms of your approach. Anne Bogart, a writer I am particularly fond of, said the three things you need to be an artist, a theatre artist. You must have something to say. कुछ तो होना चाहिए ना आपके अंदर जो आप कहना चाहते हो. Number two, you need technique. And number three, you need passion. So technique is, I feel professionalism is training. You need technique that is sandwiched between what you need to say, because what you may have a need to say something, but how you say it requires a technique. You can't have an amateur lawyer. You can't have an amateur doctor. You can't say, I'll take an amateur lawyer and usi se main apna case ladwa lunga. But you have something known as an amateur theatre actor. I think training can be anywhere. I think in a school, training is more systematic, but it can also happen in companies. It can also happen in the groups that you create in your town. They have played a very vital role in keeping the whole spirit of theatre alive. So the groups that come up in Chandigarh or Jammu or other parts of the country have played a very significant role in terms of exposing young people of the city to literature, to discipline, to training. So I think, both are important. Let me see. Okay, yes, I thought I'd answered about, Balwant Thakur has asked me about urban contemporary folk performances. This collaboration has been very vital for me. It has become really my leitmotif of working. Um, uh, uh, I remember when I did a play in which जैसे कॉस्ट्यूम्स आप बनाते हैं मेरे तो रिसाइकल होते हैं क्योंकि इतने कॉस्ट्यूम्स इतने सालों से इकट्ठे हो रहे हैं अब जगह ही नहीं बची कि आप और बनाओ और पैसा भी कम होता जा रहा है सो वेरी ऑफन द एक्टर्स पिक अप व्हाटएवर दे विश टू एंड आई choose and chisel and say ये रंग उसके साथ बैलेंस नहीं होता now I don't mind if a woman actor wears a salwar and a small t-shirt and a male actor wears a lehenga because somewhere working with female impersonators have taught me how to construct gender performatively on the stage. Let me give you an example. Long time ago, I did, when the Tagore centenary was taking place, I was invited to do a play based on the work of Tagore. The choice was entirely left to the artists that they had invited. So I did Stripatra, A Wife's Letter. Or there's an actor who works in my company called Rocky. His film name is Vansh Bhardwaj, otherwise his name is Vajendra Kumar. Many names. Ramanjit Kaur, who was working in the play as well, was coming a week later. Because it was time bound, I started the rehearsals. Another actor of mine, Gig Karewal, who was maybe at that time 54, 55 years old or 50, 50, I don't remember. She was also there as part of the production. Usko maine role diya of a 14-year-old. Rocky ko diya role Mrinal ka. When Raman came, I told her, we're going to split the role into two parts, where one becomes the narrator and the other becomes the person who enacts what is being narrated. And sometimes the narration can overlap. So because of a certain situation, new possibilities were thrown up. जब कोई limitation होता है किसी accident होता है या limitation होता है जैसे Stanislavski भी कहता है कि accidents are very important on the stage because accidents, if something happens which is an accident, then you have to somewhere challenge yourself to not let the show down. So fresh energy regurgitates inside you and you pick up the challenge and do something entirely unexpected. So in the same way, because the actors were not with me together and it was time bound and I had to start working, decisions were taken which would not follow into what you would call the stereotypical conventional choices. और फिर डर भी लग रहा था कि बंगाल जा रहे हैं टगोर कर रहे हैं मृणाल सबकी बहुत ही चाहता कैरेक्टर है पता नहीं how it will be received but it was very well received and I think in a certain way Balwantji, to answer your question, some of this risk taking also comes because I've worked with traditional performers. I've seen how traditional performers, when they do their performance, they become female performers. What does it mean to be female? Big breast, red lips, wigs, वो सब धीरे धीरे निकल गया पर मैंने देखा कि जब वो अपना शो करते हैं तो वो स्टेज पे मोहिनी का रोल कर रहे हैं या जो भी कर रहे हैं फीमेल डांस कर रही हैं तो किसी बच्चे ने हल्ला किया दर्शक में तो एकदम वो मर्द बन जाते और चुप करके बैठ जा and then they come back into their role. To me it was very Brechtian. Doing the role of Ram has done his big speech. फिर वो पेटी मास्टर बन जाता है वहां बैठ जाता है उसमें कोई उसको दुविधा नहीं लगती कोई उसमें contradiction नहीं है so working with the musicians with the traditional musicians somewhere took away the terror that we feel in not breaking rules because so many rules we inherit so many systems of working we inherit but working with them freed me from that terror which comes from what you should do and what you shouldn't do. They taught me anything is possible. Like, for example, when they, I did Keema Malki, which is one of their plays, which I was शुरू शुरू में उनके साथ किया. तो एक घोड़ा, एक एक्टर अपने ऊपर चादर डाल के घोड़ा बन जाता है और दूसरा उसके ऊपर माइम करके he goes to meet his beloved and tell her that her father's died. तो वो क्योंकि बैंड स्टाइल है, वो गा के डायलॉग इज संग, सो वो गा के बताता है कि ऐसा हुआ है. And then suddenly the horse throws the chadar and starts singing. Now this is a device which I've seen in Commedia dell'arte. It's funny. It creates a contradiction. It is exactly what Brecht said, that when there's a sad scene, how do you do that whole alienation is by creating a musical score which contradicts the scene that is happening, that has happened before you. Like they'll say Jhumka gira re Ravan ke darbar mein. So the popular, the sacred, everything gets mixed together. उसका ऐसा बढ़िया सा मिश्रण करते हैं, बेझिझक, बेडर. तो कहीं ना कहीं, I think working with them, three very vital things happen. Music entered into all my plays. Live music, not recorded music. Female impersonator and what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, which are issues we are always dealing with when we do a work of art. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Is there something, what is gender? I remember Karanth used to say to me, what does gender mean on the stage? What does age mean on the stage? I had a 55-year-old woman play a 14-year-old Bindu in Stree Patra, और मुझे कोई उसमें अटपटा लगा ही नहीं. I had Rocky play the role of a woman. मुझे बिल्कुल अटपटा नहीं लगा. मतलब मुझे लगा ही नहीं कि मैं कुछ unusual कर रही हूँ. This I have to thank the Nakals for. And today it is amazing that our great stalwarts like Mundri ji and Puran, and recently Meher ji died. They were big stars in their own way. They had become stars. They traveled with me to many parts of the country and to many different parts of the world. They've all gone. So it is a very distressing feeling to lose so many wonderful musicians that you have worked with. But it's been a wonderful collaboration. And ये सब कोई planning नहीं थी. It was like because I worked with Karanth ji in Bhopal, तो ये मिश्रण मैंने उनके काम में देखा. और जब Karanth ji ने कहा भूल के काम करना, बिल्कुल नकल मत करना, वो कहीं ना कहीं मेरे लिए बिल्कुल मंत्र बन गया. पर फिर भी मैंने कुछ ना कुछ एक्सप्लोर किया, एक वैल्यू सिस्टम, एक तरीका, बट अपने तरीके से. And then I think, I don't know, silsila aage बढ़ता गया. In Naga Mandala, they were the flames. As you know, the flames are otherworldly creatures. And in a certain way, when a female impersonator paints her face white, and then like a canvas paints the lips and the eyes on top of that canvas, they anyway look like slightly surreal creatures. So there is a kind of disorientation that they present when they come on the stage. Part male, part female, part otherworldly. So all these, so in the beginning I was using all those elements which they suggested in the way I work. Like for example in Yerma, because Yerma is a story about a woman who's yearning for a child. I wanted to show fertility and fecundity against sterility. तो मैंने 2 female impersonators को उसकी जेठानी बनाई, उसकी 2 sister-in-laws जो हैं, क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं she's living in a माहौल जहाँ कुछ पनप नहीं सकता, where the land is dry. So I was using them, I was working with them, sometimes using them as metaphors, sometimes working with them as because they brought in certain characterizations that could be accentuated and made into something else. But today, I think they are as much actors as the rest of them. But they play, उनके skills अलग हैं. Their set of skills are different. वो बजा सकते हैं, तुम भी बजाते हैं, गुबगुबी बजाते हैं, folk instruments. They are not what you would call, they don't have the classical training as you would find in Yakshagan or Kathakali or Kudiyatam, but they have local instruments. They have खुद अपने instruments बनाते हैं. And I think today, as I said, it's like they are repositories of a rich heritage that they bring to the group. तो कहीं ना कहीं वो layer करते हैं हमारे काम को. And it's just been good choices that I made. Suit. It's by a very, it's by a young writer who died very young called Karanth. It was done by the Barney Theatre Company, by Simon Barney, who was a very famous director of Cape Town, who died. And it was the whole spirit of the apartheid. For me, it was very challenging that, for me, I always say, what makes a text classical? A text is classical if it can travel through time, through geography, through cultural barriers, because it has something in it which is so fundamental to human experience कि वक्त का तकाजा उसको erase नहीं करता. Issues of love, issues of happiness, of sex, of power, of jealousy, of hatred, of sex. All these are such fundamental human emotions that वहाँ आप कह नहीं सकते ये contemporary है कि नहीं. Some plays travel very well through time because they have the possibility to be adapted, to change, to have different meanings at different points of time and value. Would you call Shakespeare dated? Would you call, so many plays that we do today, whether you do a Chekhov or you do a Ibsen. Now, I did Ibsen for the Ibsen Society in Norway. जब मैंने इब्सन के प्ले पढ़े मुझे लगा कि बहुत ज़्यादा उसमें क्रिश्चियनिटी का प्रेजेंस है, बहुत ज़्यादा उसमें it has issues like resurrection, redemption, attitudes that are very far removed from my relationship with God and the ethical world. और उसमें समुंदर का बहुत ज़्यादा प्रेजेंस है. I live in Chandigarh, which is a landlocked city, so I do not have issues of, the river doesn't mean anything to me, the sea doesn't mean anything to me. It means something to me, but it's not it doesn't enter into my life. But I felt that there were so many things that I could connect with. 125 पेज के स्क्रिप्ट को मैंने 30 पेज का बनाया without trying to lose its essence. But because it had the possibility for it to have resonance in my life, that I could do it. So I think a good play and a good text, properly edited, can be made your own. It can become your own. So what tips? I think you have to have patience, you have to have training, you have to keep your mind and heart and spirit open. You've got to read a lot. You've got to see a lot. I think training is an essential aspect of the whole journey you take as an artist. But what you get out of the training will depend upon your individual perception. And how do you enrich that individual perception? It's by all the time keeping your mind and heart open to what is happening around you. Being an artist also means to be a normal human being, but it also means to um, be connected to the world you live in. Can you separate yourself from the savagery around you, the brutality, the inhumanity, the disparity? Can you be comfortable even if you have a roof over your head and food to eat when you see thousands of farmers shoeless, homeless, foodless, walking to their place of home? Does it not impact you? So Stanislavski says something very simple. A good actor must be full of feelings. He must respond, he must react to the world he's living in. He must have an ethical core. He must have a capacity to be able to discern what is right and what is not exactly what it should be. As I said, to be a human being and to be trained. It's all a question of how you train your eye, what you look at. Like they say, two sisters looked out of the same window. One saw stars and the other saw dust. As I always say, for 5, 7 years I've been working on Monto. I've done 2 plays with the NST. One was called Bitter Fruit and the other was called Naked Voices, which was based on stories of Monto. But no matter how savage the situation is, the very fact that we are talking about it shows that there is hope. We hope that through this analysis, through this reconfiguration, through this insight, we are going through a process of humanizing ourselves and humanizing the audience that come to connect with us. So actors' preparation work for a role. When I was like for example, अभी भी मेरे actors मुझे याद करवाते हैं जब मैं यरमा कर रही थी, which is a Spanish play by Federico Garcia Lorca. I made them read a lot of poetry about Lorca. I talked about Spain. I told them about the history of Spain, about fascism, about how Lorca was killed by the fascist at the age of 32. So there was a lot of, there was a sense of what Spain represented. And because Lorca also came from Granada, from a farming community, all his imagery in the play comes from being connected to the earth. As Punjabis, we also connected to the earth. और मुझे लगता है जब पातर साहब ने अनुवाद किया, उनको कुछ चेंज नहीं करना पड़ा, क्योंकि जो लॉर्का भी हम अंग्रेजी में उसका अनुवाद कर रहे थे, स्पेनिश में तो नहीं किया, पर जो टेक्स्ट हमारे पास थी वो लॉर्का के भाई ने ट्रांसलेट किया था अंग्रेजी में. So what happened is that all the imagery in the play really came from the earth. So it was very easy to translate that. Yes, I work very hard with actors. I'm quite, I like to push the actors. I tell the actors, like what do you do with an object? I also tell them, they sometimes talk to each other and say, Madam, no, every pata hunda hai ki hum backstage kya kar rahe hain. Because I say that before you make your entry onto the stage, you have to, when Stanislavski says an actor prepares, it's not the preparation that you see of what happens on the stage, but what happens off stage. So before your entry onto the stage, I want to hear you think. What you think. Like for example, there's Tughlaq, Manohar Singh as Tughlaq, I remember when I was at the NST. Manohar Singh is giving this grand speech, as Tughlaq. पीछे सिपाही खड़ा है, वो सोचता है मेरी तरफ तो कोई देख नहीं रहे, and he starts scratching himself. What happens is, no matter how brilliant the scene in front is, your attention will go to the person who's making the error, who's not part of that scene. So for me, every moment that you are on the stage, you have to be part of the thinking of what is happening on the stage. I think the preparation is that you have to really prepare your mind also. Preparation of the mind is very important. you prepare your mind, then whatever you say will have more resonance. How you say it. The same thing. How are you? If I meet you, Arey, how are you? How are you? There's no subtext to it. But if I've had a fight with you and I want to make up with you, then how I say, how are you, where I put my comma, where I put my full stop, किस तरह का वजन मैं लफ्जों में डालूंगी, उसका कोई अलग ही मतलब होगा. So I think the preparation of an actor is very intense, and this is something which we have not evolved a system of training for the modern actor. It's really been a failure to a great extent to be able to create a methodology. But it's not a failure academically, but it's like we haven't told the actors that how essential training is. The failure isn't that. जैसे जो गाना गाता है वो रोज रियाज करता है, जो डांस करता है वो रियाज होता है डांस का. Even a writer must write 500 words a day, even if he's not writing his book or his novel. But what does a poor actor do? How does he do his riyaz? His riyaz is, and it can't be emphasized enough, read, see, think, layer your thoughts, so that nothing is superficial, nothing is shallow. Understand that art is hard. It's not a simple space to be in. You have to keep on challenging yourself constantly, every moment of the day. And everything is art. If you want to if you want to tell a story, the way you sit, the way you talk, the way you eat, the way you dress, everything is telling a story. And you have to have that alertness. Yes, an actor needs to be alert. That is a preparation, to be alert to whatever he does. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Natrang Jammu. Natrang Jammu has been a very inspirational space and has done some incredible work. And thank you for inviting me and for initiating this session that you have started. And namaskar.